Welcome to another Trash to Treasure. It's the series in which we take a neglected and unloved machine and try and restore it to its former glory while learning all about its history along the way. And today it's a machine from 1980, often forgotten, but it has its place in history because it comes from that company, Acorn, who were so important in the British micro industry. I think you're going to enjoy this series. I certainly am, because I've never looked inside one of these, so I'm interested to see what we've got hiding in there. And I think first of all, to set the scene, we need to learn about the context in which it was released. So let's go all the way back to the 1970s and see what was happening, particularly on the US side of the pond. Over there we had the first wave of affordable home computers. These were led by the Apple II, of course, the Commodore PET and the TRS-80. These American systems which paved the way for home computing. And soon after we had companies like Atari with the Atari 400 and 800 and Texas Instruments with the TI-99. Now those machines were available to us here in the UK. They obviously came with a premium price, but we could buy them. But alongside that, our own scene was developing, our own microcomputer scene developed by hobbyists, enthusiasts and engineers. Shadowing what happened in the US, the British computing scene in the 70s started with kits, DIY systems and tinkerers before transitioning into more consumer-friendly off-the-shelf machines. British examples from this period include the NASCOM 1 from 1977. This was a Z80-based kit computer inspired by the growing homebrew movement. Its founder, John Marshall, saw the potential for a British-built micro and created a machine that sold around 12,000 units. That same year, Research Machines in Oxford released the 380Z, a highly flexible system with tape and disk drive options, up to 56K of RAM, and it could run the CP/M operating system. The UK government subsidised its cost to get it into schools as a kind of precursor to the great 1980s computer literacy project that we had over here. So that machine was doing its part to show the government the impact, the potential impact of educating a nation in this newfangled microcomputer business. We also had Science of Cambridge, who launched the MK or Microcomputer Kit 14 in 1977. And we'll talk more on that in a moment because it does directly tie in with the Atom here. By 1979, we also had the Tangerine Computer Microtan 65. I love the colour scheme they've gone with this. A compact, affordable system that could be expanded into a fully featured computer. And Tangerine would later go on to create the Oric series of machines in the 80s. And of course, Acorn Computers also featured in the 70s, the creator of the Atom here. They released the Acorn System from 1979 to 1982, and these were aimed at serious enthusiasts. Modular systems that could be expanded with VDU cards, extra RAM, and cassette interfaces. But they weren't something that you'd find on the high street, and they were unlikely to be on any child's Christmas list. In 1980 though, things were about to change. Two new British computers arrived that were designed to be put on the shelves on the high street, taken home and plugged in straight out of the box that any consumer could understand, putting them on a level with their American counterparts. And these machines would set a trend for British home computing for the next decade or so. In January, Sinclair launched the ZX80, driven entirely by its £99.99 price tag. It was available pre-built or as a kit for just $79.99, and it cut costs aggressively, even using the CPU to handle video output instead of having a dedicated graphics chip. It sold around 100,000 units, so it was quite successful, before being succeeded by the ZX81 in 1981 and the famous ZX Spectrum in 1982. And it was just a couple of months after the ZX80 arrived, in March of 1980, that we saw the Acorn Atom on the shelves. Despite looking vastly different, and yes, I know these are filthy, we're going to clean these examples up and hopefully at least get one of them working, the Sinclair ZX80 and the Acorn Atom had a much deeper connection than their designs might suggest. Chris Curry, who co-founded Acorn, had previously worked with Clive Sinclair at Sinclair Radionics as far back as 1966. They had a long history together. Later, at Sinclair's company Science of Cambridge, Chris helped to develop the MK14 with the support of National Semiconductor. Now, this is pivotal to the Atom's development. This was a project that involved Sinclair's calculator technology, because he was at the forefront of creating pocket and portable calculators, and turning that technology into a fully fledged microcomputer for enthusiasts. But while Chris wanted to push this idea further into a home computer, it's reported that Sinclair wasn't interested in following that avenue in the mid-70s. So this is when Chris Curry decided to team up with Herman Hauser and then later with Sophie Wilson and with Steve Ferber to create Acorn computers. And it's from there that they created the Acorn System 1 and 2 that laid the groundwork for the first consumer-friendly home micro from them, the Acorn Atom. And unlike the ZX80, it had a proper keyboard. What a difference that makes. And that was no afterthought. Chris Curry had found a cost-effective way to build a better keyboard than Sinclair by using touching gold-plated wire contacts. And with designer Alan Boothroyd, he created a case built around that keyboard. A case that you'd also see used for the keyboard on their system range, so it had a dual purpose, this whole design. The Atom launched in 1980 at £120 in kit form or £170 pre-built, so if you had the skills you could still solder one yourself. A bargain compared to the price tag of most American systems, which were closer to the £1,000 mark, with only the Atari 400 dipping below the £500 mark with its most basic spec at that time. So there was quite a difference in the price between the low-cost budget British micros and the American offerings. As Blondie once wrote about me, "Oh, your hair is beautiful. Atomic. But to use PCBWay.com, hair is not a requirement. Anyone can check out their services ranging from PCB manufacturing to 3D printing and CNC milling. You can easily order shared projects such as this BBC Micro joystick adapter to use an Atari style joystick with the Beeb and be gaming on it within days. Check out PCBWay.com and we thank them for supporting our museums." But even at £170, the Acorn Atom of course had competition from Sinclair with its sub £100 price tag. The ZX80 couldn't be ignored. So did the Acorn Atom walk the fine line between affordability and quality? Was it a viable entry point for young minds to get into computing? Well, I know a man who actually bought one when they were new, and we're going to chat to him later to just reflect on his thoughts and see how that went for him. But first of all, let's have a look at the machines. Our priority today is to learn about the machines and about the history of them and see what we need to order. What parts do we need to possibly salvage these? If there's anything inside them, it could just be mud. I don't know yet. We'll open it up and have a look inside. And then in the next part of the series, we'll try and restore it and show it off. Let's get this out this bag. I'm going to need to put the gloves on for this one and let's take a look. We have not one but two Atoms here, the most recent donated by visitor Mark Morgan, so thank you Mark for that. The case is similar in style to Acorn's later BBC Micro, which was created by the same designer, Alan Boothroyd. It has a 60-key QWERTY keyboard and this ribbed wedge case finished in black and beige, of course it's beige. This one has a strange powder on it, it's a bit like cement dust. It's clearly been forgotten about for some decades. Around the back here, it looks like some kind of power mod has been made to it, and then later the cable's been snipped out, so we'll have to investigate that further. Other ports include a cassette tape interface and RF video output. At the other end, we've got this DB25 port, which I'd guessed maybe was used for a printer. I'm not sure. Looking inside will help us to figure that out. But aside from that, it's a remarkably straightforward device on the outside that looks like it's just designed to plug in and go. Let's test a patch of that filthy dust there with some warm soapy water, and we can see just how stubborn it may or may not be. And I think that's going to clean up just fine with a bit of elbow grease, and maybe a brush to get into all the grooves. That's a good sign. Let's take a look at the other Atom that we've got here. And on the outside, this one looks quite sorry for itself. It's got a lot of keys that have popped off, but if we get a closer look at them, they haven't just popped off, they've snapped. You can see that the top of the posts are still in the keycaps here. It's a funny design because I can't imagine it takes a lot of force on those thin plastic rectangles to snap a key. And despite masquerading as a quality keyboard, cost cutting is evident to hit that price point. The Acorn axe just wasn't quite as sharp as Sinclair's. You can carefully remove them like this, but I would be a little bit nervous about removing all of the keys to clean just in case of those brittle plastics. I think we'll probably clean them in situ and we'll see how we get on with that. Also with these Atoms is a non-standard power supply in a project box. It's labelled up as 5 volts and 2.5 amps. And I'm told that a stock Atom draws around 1.2 amps, so this would have handled an expanded system nicely. But dare we look inside it? This looks like it should be strapped to an office chair and dropped down a lift shaft by John McClane. We could service it, but I think just reusing the project box and a modern power supply would be much wiser for museum purposes. But let's see what Richard thinks of it.
Whoa! Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's got some signs of care. Is that Tipex? I reckon that's Tipex. Tipex insulation. I've not seen that before, but that really is. That really is supposed to be clamped on. So yeah, a bit of earthing, slight bit of safety, bit of strain relief. I mean, it's all just little bits, isn't it? Wow.
I'll just put that over here, shall I? So what's inside the Atom itself? Let's find out. It takes just 2 screws to open the system up. And look how compact this is. The whole system shares a PCB with the keyboard itself. Keyboard on one side, computer on the other. And every single chip is socketed. I looked into how the system was originally sold, and yes, if you bought a kit, it did come with all 52 or so sockets, and every example I can find seems to be socketed. An unnecessary cost perhaps, but one that I love. That being said, dodgy sockets are a common source of frustration according to Atom owners, so it's worth keeping in mind when we're troubleshooting. And part of the reason for that is if we look closely, they're single wipe sockets, meaning that contacts only run down one side of the chip's legs, as opposed to dual wipe, like these ones here, where contact is made on both sides. So less surface area making contact means they're more susceptible to things like corrosion or grime. And we'll keep that in mind if we run into any problems. The key specs for the Atom are a 1 MHz 6502 CPU. It's got a base spec of 2K of RAM, which can be expanded to 12K. And it looks like ours has been upgraded. I think that's 6K in there to make it a bit more useful. There's also 8K of ROM expandable to 16K. IC20 here is the operating system ROM, and ours has been upgraded with a floating point ROM in IC21, which extends our basic commands to make floating point calculations easier. It has a Motorola MC6847 video chip, which has 8 graphic modes, but you'll need extra RAM to access them all, with the highest resolution being 256 by 192. The chip outputs a 60 Hz signal, which is unusual for our British 50 Hz TVs, but with the help of a vertical hold adjustment, you could lock onto that signal, and that gives us a black and white display, or white and black if you prefer. The same chip was used in the TRS-80 Coco and the Dragon 32. And we also have that expansion port on the back added to this one, so what was that for? Well, the manual says to use a printer interface, you need to add a VIA 6522 into socket IC1, which we have, but also a 7.4 series buffer in IC50, which we don't have. And the port is wired to PL7, which is the extension bus. So I think this is just a standard input-output port from the 6522, looking at which of the 64 expansion lines the port is soldered to, but perhaps you've spotted something I've missed and you can leave a comment if so. The final thing of note I think here is the voltage regulators. So the bottom board here is the one we've been inspecting, the top is from the Atom with the broken keys, and noticeable in his absence is a heatsink and 2 voltage regulators here. And that makes sense because our Project Box PSU was providing a regulated 5-volt power supply into the system, negating the need for the onboard regulators, and this apparently was a common mod for expanded Atoms as it gives it enough juice to run reliably when expanded. It's also nice to take those hot regulators out of the system too. We can also see here that LK6 and 7 have been bridged, which was by design that allows you to bypass the onboard regulators just by linking those up. Both of our Atoms are issue 4 boards. There were 5 issues in total, and apparently issue 5 came with the same key switches as the BBC Micro, so they switched up the keyboard there a little bit for issue 5. And surely between all of these socketed spares, we should be able to pop anything out that we need and hopefully get one of the Atoms working. So that's our Atom, and I've assembled the team here to get this working. Richard is going to take on the PSU to give us a nice modern supply hidden away in that project box. Holly will do our pre-flight checks and sanity checks. before we put any power into the board, and I'll give it all a clean up so it should all come together nicely in part 2. So how was the Atom received when it was launched? Well, I've had a dig through the library here with Jason to see what reviews we can find. And the first one we can find was in Personal Computer World in July 1980. This was bench tested, and the reviewer Mike Dennis was a little bit negative on it, I think, saying that his first impressions left him cold and disappointed, having seen the superlative photographs in the glossy adverts. So judging a micro by its case there, Jason. And I think it's a pretty good looking machine personally. I mean, it's understated, but I quite like the look of it.
Yeah, I thought it was quite nice. Certainly the keyboard was very nice.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
He mentions that the price of RAM from Acorn at the time is £9.50 per kilobyte. So you'd be looking at an additional £95 if you wanted to expand it to the full 12K. He says for an additional £20, there's the floating point ROM, and he says that's good value for money. And he describes the keyboard that you said you like, Jason, as having a silky feel, but needing to thump some of the keys to make them work. Did you ever have to do that with yours?
No, not that I remember. No, it was fine.
In the reviews that I've read here, there's another one we'll come to in a minute. Both of them mention that they're working with a prototype Atom. So I'm sure it was refined a little bit further.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mike's main gripe with the system is that it deviates a lot from standard basic, and that the beginner's book that comes with it, he says, is an ego trip for a Cambridge Don. And he bemoans how many maths-based examples are included in the book. Jason's here because he had an Atom. I should have explained this at the start. He had an Atom at the time, and we're going to talk to him about his experience. So I'm just reflecting on if these things ring true for you, Jason. So can you remember the book that came with it, and can you remember it being particularly maths heavy, or did that not bother you?
Well, I do remember the book vaguely. I think it was Atomic Theory and Practice. They called
good
it.
title. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, at the time, I was quite into maths at school, so I don't remember it being particularly difficult. But I mean, it was my first computer, so I didn't really have experience of any other basic to compare it to, or any other manual to compare it to.
Yeah. There's no such complaints about this by Jim Murray then in Practical Computing in November of 1980. He describes the manual as a masterpiece of clarity, and he describes it as a thoughtful overall introduction. He does agree though that Atom Basic is definitely non-standard due to the strong link between it and the built-in assembler. And I find that really interesting because if we jump forward 6-7 years to the Acorn Archimedes, people are raving about how brilliant BBC Basic is on that platform. And that you can do inline assembler. So the link between basic and assembler, people love at that point. So it feels to me like it was just a bit ahead of its time. Both Mike and Jim conclude that the machine is suited to the educational market, with Mike saying that Atom's Basic has far too many features to aid clear thinking and comprehension, and Jim concluding that the arrival of a mini floppy drive option and something called the Cambridge Ring, which will allow multiple atoms to be linked and resources shared, could later position it better for business. So they see this very much as an educational machine from the out. Mike says it's really a shame there are some excellent ideas in the Atom, but spoilt by some basically unsound thinking at the system level as to which way computers are going in general and how to implement the ideas. So I think it's fair to say, Jason, that the reviewers aren't exactly gushing. I mean, they're not tearing it apart, but they're a little bit confused as to what it's trying to achieve. Now, you asked for an Atom back in the day, or did one just magically appear? How did you come into Atom?
No, what happened was for my birthday, my 14th birthday in 1981, I was given the option of having a home computer, and I decided to go for the Atom. Largely on the strength of one advert that Acorn had put out.
Okay, and you've brought the advert here, so we'll pop it up on the screen.
Yeah.
What was it about this advert that appealed to you as a 14-year-old?
It was quite simply the absolutely amazing graphics they were showing in those screenshots.
In colour?
In colour, yes, that's right. Yeah, and relatively high resolution. I mean, they're very impressive. So, you know, I basically got that computer on the strength of that.
Now, in the small print, there are two important things. One is that the colour requires a PAL expansion to enable the colours because of that 60 hertz chip that's doing the video output. And to have high resolution, you need additional RAM.
Absolutely.
Did you have these things?
No, I didn't. No. This is the thing. I mean, I just got the basic 2K Atom, which obviously only had access to the Mode 1 graphics, which was basically alphanumerics, and no color, obviously. So yeah, all those wonderful screens I saw in the advert, I couldn't actually produce with the machine I had myself. And unfortunately, I mean, we couldn't afford those sort of upgrades. It was expensive enough just buying the basic computer.
So what was your experience overall with the Atom, and how long did you have it for?
Well, it was okay. I mean, it was, as I said, it was my first computer, so it certainly whet my appetite. Obviously, with only 2K of RAM, of which 512 bytes were user memory, I mean, you were pretty limited in terms of what sort of programs you could write. And I remember attempting to write text adventures in BASIC and running out of storage space pretty quickly. But that kind of made me more enthusiastic. And I ended up having the machine for a year, right up until my next birthday, when, due to my enthusiasm with using this computer, my grandparents very kindly bought me an Atari 800, a 48K Atari 800, which at the time was a very expensive machine. I think it was about £400 or something like that. And then my interest in assembly language and games development kind of went on from there, really.
So the Atom was an important stepping stone then in your history of computing.
Absolutely. And I do have very fond memories of it, despite the fact that it was a very limited machine. Yeah.
So the one we're fixing up today, any nostalgic feelings towards it? Are you looking forward to seeing it working?
Yes. I've already had a little tap of the keyboard because it has the thing about the Atom is it had a very distinctive sound to the keyboard, and it's something that's really kind of stuck in my memory. So the first thing I did when I saw the Atoms we had was have a little play on the keyboard just to get that nostalgia of that sound again.
Fantastic. Right. Well, we might be calling on you again later in the series when we need someone to show us how to actually operate the machine, Jason. So dig out the old manuals.
Okay, I mean, we're going back a long way now.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed the introduction to the Acorn Atom here on this Trash to Treasure series, and that you'll follow along in the series as we hopefully get one of those two machines up and running, and follow along with any problems that we encounter along the way, and hopefully help us. Please do leave comments in the comment section, because invariably every time we do one of these series, you guys mention something down there that really helps us to get over the hurdles and make it work again. The next episode is going to be a big one. We're all going to get involved in scrubbing, repairing and checking out those machines. Jason's going to be reading his manual, ready to show us how to use it. And if you love what we do and you'd like to come and visit and take a closer look, do head to retrocollective.co.uk and you can book a visit to the museum. And if you really love what we're doing here, head to patreon.com/The Retro Collective, where you can support what we're doing every month. Look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care, everyone, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.